We have a little video of a very special person in the history of Stand to Reason, Scott Klusendorf. I thought you could take a peek at this.
I'm Scott Klusendorf, and I'm president of Life Training Institute. You may notice that I'm wearing an STR shirt right now. Actually, I got this shirt back in 1998 when I first joined the organization, but I'm wearing it today, as I often do, for a very simple reason. It's a reminder of the impact Stand to Reason has made on the pro-life cause, of which I am a spokesperson. What you may not know is how Stand to Reason impacted the larger pro-life cause, and I want to take just a minute to talk about that. Two things happened as a result of Stand to Reason's work that I think changed the face of pro-life advocacy in the last 10 years. First of all, Stand to Reason provided pro-life advocates with translatable, friendly content. Here's what I mean by that. There's lots of smart guys out there giving good philosophical arguments for the pro-life view, but there aren't a lot of translators, people who can take those smart ideas and make them understandable to lay people. Stand to Reason does that. Greg Koukl pioneered, in my view, the methodology of not only thinking clearly, but speaking clearly to lay people who may not understand the more sophisticated arguments in support of Christian theism, including the pro-life view. Second thing Stand to Reason did, Stand to Reason gave pro-life advocates a link to the larger apologetics movement. Before the last, 15 years or so, the pro-life movement was largely a movement of rallies, races, golf tournaments, marches, banquets, all of which are good things, but we weren't systematically training people to make a case for the pro-life view in the public square. Stand to Reason changed that for the good. With the start of Greg Koukl's important book, Precious Unborn Human Persons, and as well his book on relativism with Frank Beckwith, we were able to put in the hands of your average aspiring pro-life advocate tools for making their case on hostile turf. And that has launched a plethora of good resources and good things that pro-lifers can use to reach those who don't agree with them. Right now, I'm not with you, though I wish I could be, because I'm joined by Frank Beckwith and Patrick Lee and others over near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The reason we're not at that Biola conference is because we're training politicians this weekend to make a case for life in the public square. I think we can all agree that after the last election, we need to equip our politicians to be better spokespersons for life. And you know what? Guess whose tactics and guess whose strategies we'll be using? Yeah, you got it, Greg Koukl. There's going to be a lot of politicians in the next few years, the Lord willing, running around saying things like, now why would you believe a thing like that? And how did you come to that conclusion? And have you considered the implications of your view? When we start hearing politicians make a case for life, you'll know where to look as to where they got it. Look no further than Stand to Reason. What a joy, what a privilege to have been associated with Stand to Reason for the years that I was, and I continue to look forward to that relationship. God bless you this weekend as you celebrate an absolutely wonderful ministry.
Can I call the teaching team from Stand to Reason up on stage to be... Thank you. Thank you. You bet.
But nobody's want to sit. They don't want to sit next to me.
Hey, Greg, could I ask you to introduce your staff who blessed us with their presence tonight? Melinda can help if you forget some names.
Now, I got to tell you, there's a story behind this. My hesitation, and they're all looking at each other because what they're asking is, after 10 or 12 or 15 years, is he going to remember my name? Right? Okay. Well, Melinda Penner, obviously, founder of Stand to Reason. You want to stand up, Melinda? Amy Hall, one of our apologist bloggers. Derek White. Derek runs the product development. Kyle, stand up and say hi. Kyle's the only stand to reason guy with a tattoo. Okay. Tom Pauls. Danielle. Danielle handles the schedules for the other speakers. Tom is our IT guy, and you saw the launch of the website and also of the radio show, the new radio show Tuesday night. Tom was massively involved in the success of that, along with Chrissy. Chrissy, stand up and give a wave here. Did I get everybody? Did I get any names wrong? Unbelievable. Okay, there. That's my fabulous team. And because I have a team like this team, and we have one in the hospital right now who's recovering from cancer, and she's been with us for almost from the very beginning. But it makes it possible for me to focus on the things that I do best, so I don't have to worry about the other stuff. I can just focus on developing, speaking, moving forward, writing things, and you have no idea that we would not be able to do the kinds of things that we can do to offer to you without a team like this. It's a fabulous team, and I'm proud of every one of them. Thank you.
Greg.
I have a few questions for them just so we can get to know them a little bit and see if they can teach us a few things on the fly tonight. Hey, you guys are out in the churches a lot. This is an open question for whoever wants to jump in. So that means, Greg, you don't answer yet. Okay. You're out in the churches a lot. What's your assessment of the openness to apologetics now? Is it a whole new day where churches are open, or do you still have to get out the can opener and pry it open to see if they'll be interested in apologetics?
I think we have to make a case still for making a case. And it's often, I find that situation, I don't know how you guys find it too, I think that there's lots of places we go where we take this for granted. We're Christians the way we're Californians. And if you ask me, I'm a Californian. Well, what's the state legislature in California like? I don't know. When was the state founded? Well, I don't know. How many counties are there? I don't know. But I'm a Californian because I happen to live in California. And I think a lot of us are Christians because we happen to have grown up in the church. And it's time for us to shake the cage a little bit and remind people there's a reason why we believe what we believe. And I think you have to make a case sometimes. I don't know about you, but I've sometimes been asked not to speak at certain places because they aren't quite sure what apologetics is all about. They kind of think there's a book, maybe they want to have me come out, but when they realize I'm going to make a case like this is objectively true, they're kind of hesitant.
Yeah, I think it's
Jim Wallace, by the way, or Jay Warner. I don't know what to call you anymore.
Well, I lost my name because of Greg. I had a name, Jim Wallace, for many years, for like almost 50 years. And then I started doing radio, and Greg says you can't use that name anymore.
Well, you know there's another Jim Wallace out there who's very, very different in his perspective of Christianity than Stand to Reason. And so when Jay Warner came on board on the show as Jim Wallace, we got calls in saying, man, you guys are really broad-minded. You're going to have Jim Wallace on the show. So we had to make the distinction, and professionally he'd been known as Jay Warner, so we thought we're going to go that direction.
True.
Thank you for that sacrifice, Jay Warner.
That's
by
right.
the way.
Do what I can.
Your assessment of the openness of churches towards apologetics, guys?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, but there are definitely signs of hope. And I think sometimes we're in these circles with people who are already on board, and we get, of course, a lot of the churches we get invited to are places where we've got Stand to Reason people there or people who are on board with apologetics. And so it can kind of, I think, maybe tilt our view a little bit, skew our view that, wow, a lot of people out there think the way we think. But then you go where there's maybe one person who's somehow, wrestled you in there despite the protests of their elders or their pastors. And then you see that, you've got to really make a case for this. And you realize what's at stake. I mean, here's maybe the first introduction to a church of apologetics. It doesn't surprise me now how many churches out there, how many Christians out there know nothing of this. And so I think we sometimes take it for granted, so I think we still have to make the case.
Brett Kunkel. Alan, you had something.
I think Brett's right. It is a mixed bag. I think we see it on both ends where, we do have to make a case that there is a need for apologetics. But at the same time, I feel like over the last few years, kind of the desire for us to, or the draw for us to be pulled out into churches and around the country to speak on these issues has increased, making me think that there is an increased need. But the other thing I think about is oftentimes the way we make the case is to show them that there's a need, that they have a need for apologetics. And this is one thing that Brett does with his atheist role play. I've done with my Muslim role play and the pro-life role play.
By the way, it's very convincing. You can see.
I grew a beard not to look like a Muslim, but to avoid the appearance of Mr. Bean. So that's kind of.
Yeah. I do the Mormon role play very effectively.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. For a minute, you had me fooled, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, oftentimes when we do these role plays that Sean talked about as well, people realize, wait a minute, I don't have a way to respond to what you're saying. I mean, you're a Christian and you're actually, pretending to be a Muslim or pretending to be an atheist, and yet we don't even know how to respond to this. And so seeing that in themselves, they realize, man, we have a need for what you're trying to offer, and that is, of course, apologetics. So I would say, yeah, we got to make a case, and one of the best ways we can do that is to show them through these kinds of interactions that, maybe they're not completely prepared for what to expect when they get out there. So that's kind of one of the ways we do it.
Yeah, when you asked that question, I thought, listen, every church I go to is thrilled about apologetics, but that's why they asked me to go to that church. So I'm looking at the long view, and Craig, you remember like in the late 80s when I was a student there at Simon Greenleaf and you were running that program. That was an itty-bitty program. Yeah. And when we started doing events at Stand to Reason a few years later, we'd get people coming out, but, it was exciting to see the response, but something has really taken place over the last, I'd say, 15 years. We were thrilled to be part of, I think, a groundswell of interest in thoughtful Christianity that the Holy Spirit began producing way back then. And then Craig left the Greenleaf, and now we have Biola's massive program. It's wildly successful, and programs popping up around the country like this. And not only that, I mean, it used to be fall, but now it's throughout the year. There are apologetics conferences going on everywhere. 6 weeks ago, we were up in north of Sacramento, 3,000 people showed up for the conference there at this church, and we see this all over. So even though there's a tremendous need, as the fellows have been mentioning, and I do see that the need is incredible, I'm looking at where we've come from, and there's been a massive movement of the Holy Spirit, and we are thrilled at Stand to Reason to have been one player in that movement, and you are all part of that as well. And to see what God is producing, not just in more and more, in a sense, professionals that are coming on board. Mary Jo, for example, sharing her journey. Sean's been around for a while, and many others that you see popping up and making their contribution. I'm really thrilled about what I call the third column, and tomorrow I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. But in general, I mean the rank and file, the foot soldiers, people just like most of you in the audience who will never have your name on a book and you'll never have your name on a marquee of an apologetics conference, but you're out there laying it down day after day in the local church, in the local community, at the university, making a difference where your boots hit the ground, and that is the future of apologetics. To see that happening, fabulous. Fabulous.
Hey, this question might be most for our youth specialists, Jay Warner and Brett. But I'm curious about how real you think this reported loss of young people in the church today is. That's definitely related to apologetics, in that some people think that they haven't been grounded in good answers. But first of all, how real is this purported loss?
Well, I think it's real. What the exact numbers are, it's hard to determine. So you've got some studies that put it at 50%, you got some studies that put it at 70, some at 80. I think anecdotally, we all know, I mean, we could probably survey everyone in here who would have different stories of young people they know that, not even when they've just gone off to college, but even in high school now. We all know somebody whose kids, maybe some of you who here have kids that have walked away, your family or friends have kids, there's kids in your church. We all know young people that have walked away. That was some of us for a period of time before we did come back. So what are the exact numbers? I don't know, but it's certainly, I think just from our experience, we know it's a real problem. In fact, the talk I'm going to do tomorrow morning is called Who's Waiting for Your Kids? After that talk, every single time I get multiple parents, adults who will come up to me and say, that was my kid that walked away, or my kid is in college right now. and they're just going through all this tremendous doubt. Yeah, what are the exact numbers? I think it's difficult to determine, but I think it is definitely a real problem.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, we both know from working as youth pastors, we know that in our own youth ministries, we saw this happen. We saw that young people were walking away. And what disturbs me the most is, I don't care what number you're looking at in terms of your survey. The numbers vary, like you said. But I think it is real. And when you survey why young people are leaving, it's always the same. The people leave for the majority reason, when left in an open question format, is that they have intellectual skepticism, doubt. They don't believe it's true anymore. But sadly, when they return, and Lifeway says about 30% will return to the church anyway, it could be higher. But when you survey them, why are you coming back? I'm looking to see, well, okay, do you now believe it's true? That's not what they say. The largest group, the largest reason for why they return is because they want to raise their kids in the church. So what you have is not only that we have young people leaving the church, but those who come back are forever changed. They're sitting in our churches, and they aren't committed to what we believe. And I think for me, I'm very committed. Look, I'm 52. People my age are not leaving the church, folks. They are, but not the kind of numbers we're seeing for young people. I do apologetics. I do Christian case making, and that's the audience. I wrote Cold Case Christianity because Sean and I were teaching this to high schoolers. And he said, you should write a book about that. And I said, I don't think I have time, But it was designed for young people. We can raise the bar on young people and teach them this stuff. And I honestly think that the future of Christian case making should have one audience in mind: young people. Amen. And that 14 to 30, that's where the damages occur. That's where we're losing numbers. Those are the people who are no longer convinced it's true. And so I'm committed, like Brett is, to making sure that audience is always in my target.
If you want a good feel for where our young people are at, you should read the book Soul Searching by Christian Smith. Christian Smith is a sociologist. He was at University of North Carolina. He's now at Notre Dame. He did a major study with it was a national study of youth and religion, a very in-depth study where they really attempted to find out where are our young people at in their kind of spiritual and religious lives. And that book just gives you a very good feel for where they're at. And I'll share a couple of the findings in that book tomorrow.
Good. Yeah, I wanted to jump off of Jay Warner's comment and actually to pat him on the back a little bit, because he said something a number of years ago about this whole thing about youth that really stuck with me, and I've repeated it a number of times because I think it's so powerful for those of you who have contact with youth or maybe youth leaders and the like. I don't like talking to youth personally. To me, it's kind of like talking to a painting, and I like people responding to me, I could tell a joke that makes the adults are falling in the aisle, and the kids are just looking at me like, we're not going to laugh at you, mister, that kind of thing. So I'm glad I got guys that are really committed to that, because I really believe in the strategic importance of it. It's not my thing, it's not my niche, but we believe in that at Stand to Reason. This is why we're giving time, attention, effort, resources to that enterprise. Here's what Jim said a number of years ago that really stuck with me. And it's based on his own experience of working with youth leaders, youth groups, as a leader himself, and being frustrated with the results. And the way I recall it, Jim, is you said you came to a point where you just said, doggone it, I am tired of throwing candy at these kids. From now on, here's my job. My job is to make sure that after these kids are with me for 4 years in my youth group, and he was a layperson at the time, but he was doing youth work, that when they're done after 4 years with me, they never leave Christ. Boy, can you imagine what would happen to our youth if youth leaders around the country said, I'm tired of throwing candy at these kids. It's my job to be a pastor to them and disciple them so that 4 years after they leave me, they never leave Jesus.
Bravo.
I hope I got that right, Jim, because I've been telling that story all over the country.
It always sounds better.
Good.
It sounds better when you tell it anyway. So.
Yeah, a little setup and then a question. One of my favorite books in the last decade was this funny little book called The Death of Christian Britain. And this fellow by the name of Callum Brown, who's a professor in the UK, did this analysis of the death of Christian Britain, and I thought the book reviewers would take issue with his basic title, you know. And nobody did, because people said, oh yeah, it's definitely dead, you know. It doesn't mean that Christianity has completely been wiped off the face of the British Isles, but rather that the British people stopped identifying themselves with the Christian faith. Well, one thing that he addresses, and he spends a couple of chapters on this particular issue, and it just caught my attention. He calls it, one factor in the death of Christian Britain was the feminization of the church. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but it just like the men in Britain didn't have anything for them in the church anymore. And I'll tie that with something else. William Lane Craig recently in a blog post or some sort of Facebook entry said something about how thrilled he was on his recent tour because so many men would turn out at his presentations. Do you find there's some special rejuvenation going on among men when they hear apologetic messages? What's the relationship here?
Well, my observation, at least early on, was that mostly men showed up with their girlfriends or wives in tow. And I saw that changing. So in the area of apologetics, it seemed more like this was more of a guy thing at first, and I've seen over the last probably 10 years into our enterprise at Stand to Reason, the demographic had changed considerably, and I was really, really glad to see that, because it's not a man thing. It's a human thing. It's a person thing. It's a Christian thing. Followers of Christ need to be thoughtful about their convictions and be able to engage. Not just the guys that have the pocket protectors, and do all. It's not just a left brain
Hey,
thing.
watch it. John Bloom's sitting down there.
Yeah. So my observation about those that have been coming to events, that particular demographic has been more male, and now it's getting more generalized. I do think this is a problem in the church, and it's so much of a problem, the feminization, that even Craig Hazen had to say, but that's not a bad thing. You notice that? He didn't want to make half of you really mad, right?
I met a woman one time, yes.
But I think it's largely because the church has been, women have gravitated towards spiritual things more aggressively than men. And consequently, there haven't been a lot of men that have engaged spirituality by comparison in rich, aggressive ways. And I think that is beginning to change a bit. Remember when that book Iron John came out about 15 years ago? That was addressing a similar kind of thing. It was a secular author. And then more things came out by Christian authors to address that. And I think there's some change going on there. But I think that is a concern, although I don't see it in the same way in the apologetic circles.
I noticed something watching Jay Warner's presentation in the desert a few weeks ago. He did this wonderful cold case Christianity presentation. I don't know how you crammed all that into 30 or 35 minutes. Just amazing. But I spent most of the time, I watched it twice. The first time I watched this presentation, the second time I watched the audience. And the men in the audience were just leaning forward like I've never seen them before in a church. So there was something there for them. I think this feminization thing...
He's got a gun, that's why.
Oh! And he had a badge. He pulled back his... it was...
Hey, are you packing heat right now?
I'm feeling protected.
If I'm breathing, I'm typically got something, yes. But I can tell you, there's a lot of cops. You discover that there are people who, a lot of cops are at these presentations. There are several law enforcement officers in this room right now that I've met over, the last year or so, and are drawn to an evidential approach. And we just recognize that, one of the things you do for a living, we're working with evidence every day. And we've taken it for granted. This is this is a transferable skill set. And I think one thing I always try to say with young people, and I think, Sean, you would agree with me on this, and Brett, you would too for sure, is that I typically say if we want to change the youth culture, we need to stop teaching. And we need to stop teaching immediately. And we need to start training. And there's a difference. Because training is teaching with the fight at the end. Basically, fighters get fat between fights, right? I mean, until they sign the next fight, they get fat. Then they get a fight signed, and suddenly they're training like crazy because in 6 weeks, if they can't do this, they're going to get beat. So they want to be training to get ready for the fight. And so what we started doing years ago was scheduling fights. So in 2 weeks, you guys are back in Utah before. Are we first? I think we're first going.
Already did the.
Dude, we're going in 2 weeks.
Don't
You
get
going
in a
2
fight
weeks?
about it. Come on.
Don't start that. You
I
know
went
what?
in 2
Tomorrow.
weeks.
You know what?
We have
This guy is such a nuisance. You're going to see tomorrow. Is he a nuisance, Mary Jo? You know he is.
You sound like a senior citizen, man.
Dude, that is so it. I am not going to feel bad. Amy, am I going to feel bad about my presentation tomorrow now? No, I'm not going to feel bad. So just come tomorrow. I've got something to say about
we
what you
had a
just said.
deal.
No, deal's off. Deal is off. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, now that the cranky old guy has.
No, what we started to do, we started to schedule fights. In other words, we scheduled the battle that they're going to face eventually. And that might be a week in Berkeley, where they're going to meet with the best atheist minds we can put in front of them. Or that's going to be a week in Utah. We're going to be in a week from Monday, we're going for a week. And we're going to put the best, I've got a big LDS family. I got 6 brothers and sisters who are all Mormon. And I can tell you that we're going to spend time talking to a lot of Mormons in a week. And that's going to have to, our kids are going to have to get ready and become good Orthodox theologians in order to spend time on the street combating, which is a very sophisticated heresy. So we're going to spend time by scheduling. Now you're not just teaching, now you're training because a fight is coming. And kids take that much more seriously.
And I think, and I was going to, go ahead. Yeah, you can clap for him. Okay.
That's what we do.
I taught him everything he knows.
Oh, jeez, here we go. You can tell we were pretty good friends after all these years.
Kind of connecting this whole kind of fight mission idea with kind of the feminization issue that you brought up. I think one thing that I found is that with apologetics being connected to the larger mission of the church and used in the service of evangelism and our mission to proclaim the gospel, I think there's a big appeal there for men to live their life for this greater mission. Yeah. And this battle, and I know a lot of kind of postmodern voices out there have really warned us against, battle language and this kind of thing. And of course we have to be careful with it, but it's the language of Scripture. Paul says that we're in a war, we're in a battle, we're in a fight. And of course we conduct ourselves in a different kind of way as ambassadors with knowledge, wisdom, and character. But I think this kind of apologetics in the service of our mission, of the proclamation of the gospel, has an appeal that I give my life to this great raging battle, this unfolding drama through the ages. And this is where I see the young men that we take on these mission trips. We've got 2 that we've developed, to Berkeley and to Utah. And in fact, when I first came on to Stand to Reason in 2003, it was the summer of 2004, where I had done these with my own youth groups when I was a youth pastor. And the very first trips that I took to Utah and to Berkeley were with Jim when he was a youth pastor. And what we saw is just this would light the guys up. Because they would gear up for the fight, so to speak. Yeah. And we taught them how to fight well and to fight as good ambassadors. But I think there's a big appeal there.
Very good. I was teaching a men's group one night, and they were going to have some songs before I got up to speak. And so a guy got out a guitar and they started singing songs. And I don't remember exactly what the lyrics were, but it's something like, "Jesus, hold me close and stroke my hair." And and I'm seeing some of these burly men singing these songs. And I go, wow. And I saw a stack of hymnals in the corner of the room. I went and got one. And so when I got up to speak, I read some of the lyrics of the 19th century hymns, And it's not just "Onward, Christian Soldiers." There's all kinds of lyrics that say, let's go break things for Jesus, And the men were like, yeah, that's what we want to sing, Yeah. Okay, guys, what are some of the worst arguments you've ever heard?
You mean from other staff members?
Of course. No.
Just dig that hole deeper, Brett. Just dig it deeper.
You mean from Christians or from non-Christians?
Either one. Just some of the worst arguments. You go, oh my gosh, I can't believe somebody would even offer that up in a serious way.
Well, I'll tell you one that comes to mind right now, and I'm not trying to start a fight with anybody, but, and I'm not trying to campaign for one side or another on this particular issue, but in the discussion about the age of the universe, it troubles me deeply as a Christian thinker to hear people say, you weren't there to see it, I wasn't there to see it. God was the only one there to see it, so we have to hear what God says. Now, I'll tell you, and then they make their argument for their particular view based on what their understanding of God says is. Now, here's what troubles me about that. It's a subtle adopting of a very non-Christian epistemology. If you see it, you can know it. But if you don't see it, then you can't know it unless God tells you. Do you realize that most of the things that you don't know from experience with your five senses? You know them from different ways. There are lots of ways we know things. We know things from our five senses. We know things from introspection and reflection. We know things from a direct awareness. We know things by authority. I mean, there are lots of ways to know things. And when Christians argue this way, it bothers me. And I don't care, it doesn't matter what side they're defending when they say that. It bothers me that they are taking away tools that we have to make our broader case with the world. If we're saying, we're making basically the empirical argument that the only way you can know things is if you can personally know things, is if you personally experience or saw it happen. Well, that isn't the only way to know things. There are lots of different ways to know things. And so we aren't just thrown back on a Bible interpretation to give us information if we haven't seen it ourselves. We have a very, very rich recourse of things that we can draw upon as knowers, as human beings made in the image of God, to test the world to see if it's not so. So I don't know if that's what you were after, but that was the first thing that popped into my mind when you said bad arguments.
Anybody else?
I'll give you one that I got from a Christian, and this was when I was doing an atheist role play. I was at a church here in Southern California, and I think I gave the group a real run for their money for about 45 minutes. And I said, okay, and they thought I was the real deal. They thought I was a local community college professor. So they thought I was a real atheist. Do the role play. I asked for the last question, right? And so a bunch of people in the audience were pointing at this older lady who was raising her hand. And, she looked like kind of the wise sage of the group. She had waited to, give her comments at the end. And here I was, about to be demolished. And so she stands up and she looks at me and she says, the reason why you are an atheist is because you love your sin. And you want to, you want to be immoral. And so I responded, and I said, well, ma'am, I think that's the genetic fallacy. You're attacking the origin of my belief. I may have good reasons that you haven't dealt with, and kind of went that route. And then she, after, kind of engaged her a little bit, she then looked at me and she said, well, the Bible also tells us that not only do you love your sin, but that we are not to throw our pearls before swine.
Oh, that's nice.
So that was, I think, so I think the worst argument I heard was that one from a Christian. I hope she's not out there watching.
She's watching online, probably.
Well, I speak a lot on the topic of homosexuality, so naturally I get all kinds of arguments in favor of homosexuality. And in particular, people are now no longer just trying to make the case that homosexual behavior is morally permissible, but they're trying to substantiate it from Scripture. And so oftentimes I'm like, well, what reason would you have for thinking that's the case? That Scripture somehow either condones homosexual behavior or is a neutral on the subject. And surprisingly, I still get the argument that it's because, look, Jesus and John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, were gay. What? They say, yeah, because even in Isaiah 53, it says he was cut off. He was a eunuch. So you look at Isaiah 53, which of course is a prophecy about Christ, and if you just read it in context, never read a Bible verse, it says Jesus Christ was cut off from the land of the living, meaning he was killed, not castrated. But nevertheless, I seriously get that argument quite often. It's bizarre.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not sure I can follow that argument.
How about the toughest audience you've ever faced?
The toughest audience?
Yeah, do you have a quick story about the toughest audience you've
let
ever
me just
been
throw in one quick thing, too,
Okay.
about the arguments, just for sake of, I think, a battle we have ahead of us as Christians. Part of what drives me crazy is this sense that you cannot make a case about something in the past unless you have certain categories of evidence. So it drives me nuts. Oh, that's just a circumstantial case. Really? That's every case I do. They're circumstantial cases. I've never had a case with direct evidence. If there were good pieces of direct evidence, it wouldn't be cold. I mean, so you really have this issue you have to deal with, is that can we know something from the past if we weren't there to see it, or we can't talk to somebody who was even there to see it? Can we build the most reasonable inference in a compelling way with the cumulative circumstantial case? And what is that category of evidence? Does anyone really even know what the categories of evidence are? And so you constantly have people, especially some of the brightest minds on both sides, on both the Christian side and the atheist side, who don't understand how we build cases and think we have to have a certain kind of evidence, a certain kind of forensic evidence, or a certain kind of direct evidence that I've never had in a case. So I think that's one of the things it's a goal I have to start with. And tomorrow we won't be talking about circumstantial evidence, unfortunately, but it is an important skill set that I think we need to teach people to help them understand how to do it. Every case we do is about making a determination about what happened in the past, and we're not there to see it, but we can figure it out.
Thanks for that. Any tough audience stories?
We just had a tough audience last week, don't you think? Because Sean killed him for us. Did you notice that? We did a role play last week at a conference. Sean went first. He did atheist role play. About 40% of the audience became atheist and left. And I swear, we couldn't even get him back. Did we get him back? I don't think we got most of them back, did we? I don't know. I felt like, oh my gosh, get him off the stage. He's killing us. Didn't you feel that way?
Yes, he played that well.
Way
that
too
role
well. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
Way too well. But I remember it was last year. It was we were on a Berkeley mission trip. I was with a Christian school here in Southern California. We trained them. We took them up, and one of the things we had arranged is a panel discussion with UC Berkeley's Student Atheist Club. They call themselves SANE, Students for a Non-Religious Ethos. And
what students for advocating a non-religious
for
students advocating a non-religious ethos.
You know what? I'll explain to you afterwards. And we arranged this panel discussion. We had two or three of their students who were up on the panel, and then 2 or 3 of our students who were on this panel. And the audience was a mix of our group and then students from SANE. So it was a mix of Christians and skeptics. And I was moderating. And the SANE students were they were asking very aggressive questions, really kind of going after our young people. And as I'm moderating, I'm trying to help it to be a fair fight. And what ended up happening, I don't exactly know how this happened, but midway through the conversation, as I'm trying to help our students a little bit and moderate, the SANE students, the atheist students, the skeptics, turned their guns on me and started, pounding away at me, and it got really aggressive and unruly, and it was kind of a wild ride. Afterwards, I was excited. I'm like, yeah, what? We got in there, we knocked some ideas around, and the students were like traumatized. Our students were like, but I think one insight I gained from that is that our young people and a lot of Christians are never in the battle. Right, they never get knocked around like that. So these students were like, oh my gosh. Yeah. I thought that if I simply am nice enough, right? If I'm like Jesus and I just am meek and mild, well then people they're gonna want to hear the gospel. Mm-hmm. And sometimes warfare is messy, and the spiritual battle is a battle.
Yeah. Thanks.
I speak oftentimes on fairly controversial issues. So I'm a generalist, like a lot of these guys, but I focus a lot of times on homosexuality, Islam, abortion, evolution. So really controversial issues, and where everybody just agrees with me all the time. Yeah. No, but what's surprising about it is oftentimes I find myself in front of a university audience, a secular university audience, making my case on some topic, and so you can imagine pretty controversial, pretty hostile questions, and you kind of get used to that, and that's fine. But what's surprising is the only time I've ever had actually anybody stand up and yell at me was at a church, and it was on the topic of biblical interpretation. I was just simply making a case that if you offer an opinion about your interpretation regarding a passage of Scripture, you could be mistaken. There's right interpretations and there's wrong ones. And a guy stood up without even, any warning, and just started shouting at me. And I had to pause for a moment and think, well, he must have not understood what I said, because who would get so upset about that? And so I kind of clarified with him just to make sure, and no, he understood what I said. But he was just so livid about that. And again, I hope he's also not in this room today. But anyways, it's interesting, because a topic like that, I find now, as I've been speaking on the role of biblical interpretation, and even in the context of apologetics, I'm finding this is a controversial issue, because a lot of people have bad habits that they've learned either from it being modeled from the pulpit, or just having not ever been taught specifically how to exegete a passage. Not that you need to be a Greek scholar, but just basic rules of interpretation, context, history, genre. And I'm finding, man, there's a lot of resistance to that kind of stuff, especially in churches, of course.
Kevin Lewis and I, one time, were in front of an audience. We were doing a role play. It was actually a mock debate. I was a Wiccan priest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I had a black turtleneck on and an amulet. My hair was slicked back. And Kevin Lewis, who's a theologian in my department, was role-playing a theologian. And he did all right with it. But towards the end, people rushed the stage. Security had to run out. We had to have a police escort out of the place. It was... We needed Jay Warner there.
That's the only reason why I get asked to go on half these trips. I know. Sean only asked me to go because he knows I'm going to bring a gun. That's the only reason why he asked me.
I was thinking about tough situations I've been in, and actually most of my experiences, especially in a university environment, has been good. And indeed, one of the best audiences I ever had was when I lectured at Berkeley on a Friday night and a Saturday night to a huge audience, and it was overflow capacity kind of thing. And that was fabulous. And so I'm thinking, though, well, what bad experiences have I had? And then I remembered something that was so bad I had repressed it for the last 10 years. Melinda, you'll remember this, because I was asked to go on a TV show to discuss the issue of same-sex marriage. Now, this is back in 2004, 2005, some back there around that time. And when I get these invitations, well, they're legitimate. There are opportunities to talk about an issue, and it was an invitation to be on a panel where we would discuss these things. I went down to CBS Studios, whatever it is. They shuttled me into the green room. I was actually by myself in this room. They had me sign off some papers and all the rights, and you kind of go through this stuff, but something seemed a little bit odd about it, and I was in that back room for a long time. But the idea was that I'm going to go out, and I'm going to be part of a panel that has a thoughtful discussion on the issue. Well, Melinda went into the proper green room just before they ushered me out into the place where the audience was and everything. And so she's watching this thing going on TV. And do you remember this? I get ushered out, and there's this big wild audience that's there, and there is a stage, but I'm not on it. And there's a couple people on the stage, and in the audience there's this stand where like an audience person can come out and stand before a mic, and that's where they put me. And then they got the panel all roused up, and then they said, and here's such and so, said my name, and then who thinks that same-sex marriage is wrong. Take it away, one of these, take it away, Oh, I'm the rabble-rouser guy, and so I had already planning to do this thing sensibly. I had rehearsed something in my mind, and I had to try to do the best I could to say something reasonable, but it was a complete setup. It was a total spoof. The whole thing was to make people like me look like an idiot, and it was all being filmed for TV. But I had no idea what was going. In fact, the name of the program, I can't even recall the name of the program, except for that it was sexually suggestive. And they didn't tell us this, before we went on. That was a absolutely miserable experience. And that was one of those times when do you remember this now? It was a terrible thing. And I could not believe that we had been so abused by those people and so misled to go in with a good spirit and wanting to make a good faith effort to discuss this controversial issue. And then I was tossed up there at the last second, and the camera was on, and bang, and I had to say something. Oh, it was awful. It was just awful. That's when you walk away and you say, well, whatever. I don't know what that was, but God, I trust you'll use that for some good thing. That show didn't last very long, as I recall, but that was a bad experience.
Oh, my. Give us a very brief introduction to what you're going to be speaking on tomorrow.
I'm trying to decide. No, actually, I think we're going to address the issue that many people are challenged with in college. This idea that there's so many changes, small variations from scribal changes in the text of the New Testament that you really can't trust what it says. It's been popularized by Bart Ehrman. So we're going to take a look at that. And is it possible for us to be able to faithfully and accurately return to the original of the text? And there's a great analogy I think we see in crime scenes. So we're going to set up a little bit of a crime scene here, and then we'll walk through it together and give you a skill set that'll help you remove artifacts from the evidence of Scripture.
My topic's called Compromise is Not an Option, and basically what I'm going to be doing is taking a look at some of these controversial issues that I've been speaking on over the years: homosexuality, Islam, evolution. Did I mention Islam? I don't know. Anyways, but so those kinds of things, and looking at how oftentimes Christians who are not grounded on these issues are finding themselves compromising their biblical convictions because they don't, well, they're buying into what culture says about these things. They're buying into the false ideas. And so I'm going to talk about how these topics, despite what many people say, oh, they have nothing to do with the gospel, they're irrelevant, Jesus didn't talk about them, are still critical things for us as believers to stand firm on and not compromise. So that's what that's about.
I'm doing a talk entitled Who's Waiting for Your Kids? And what I want to do is just give you a lot of detail about what's going on in the culture, what's going on the college campus. I want you to see what college professors are saying. I want to talk about the real challenges that are out there, not just the intellectual challenges, but other challenges, and kind of set the stage that way. It's really a wake-up call to the church that our young people are facing tremendous battles out there. And then I'm going to lay out a 4-step strategy that we can use to, whether you're a parent, a youth pastor, an educator, a 4-step strategy to begin training your young people.
Very good.
I think at an event like this, there's a temptation to look back at 20 years at organization like Stand to Reason and to think of it as the result of careful planning and vision and design and that kind of stuff. And actually, our history is filled with events that were apparently serendipitous at the time, very small examples of one person standing and being faithful in a minor thing that ended up making all the difference, changing the trajectory of my life and then later on Stand to Reason. And I want to try to cobble together a number of snapshots of those kinds of things tomorrow so that not only you can see the significance of an individual faithful person standing, but also to see the hand of God that was sovereignly on my life and the life of others that are associated with Stand to Reason to bring us to this point that we're at today. And this I want to talk about before the beginning, a little bit of the history of Stand to Reason in the process of telling this narrative, and where we're at now and what I see for the future. And what I see for the future is a little bit frightening for me, and I want to offer that. But the name of the talk is Still Standing.
Very good. Well, that's a great lead into this. I think we should give them an award. Biola University has produced this wonderful little gem, and it says, Biola University honors Stand to Reason for 20 years of faithful ministry. And Greg, I want to present this to you on behalf of Biola University.
Thank you, Craig.
You bet.
God bless you. Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
we've been calling this an anniversary, but it's kind of like a birthday, so I think we should sing Happy Birthday to Stand to Reason. I do. Oh, look. There's
Or not.
Look, a cake. Happy
my
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stand to Reason. Happy birthday to you.
Am I supposed to make a wish now?
Yes,
Is
you
that
do.
it?
You make a wish. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And Melinda, could you come up and just receive some flowers? You're the brains behind this outfit. Bravo.
Congratulations. There you go.
The enforcer, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. 'Cause, 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 'cause,
Can I have a word?
Yes.
A lot of sacrifice goes into an organization like Stand to Reason over 20 years' time, and I've introduced my staff, and you all know the significant role that Melinda has played in this organization, what the other guys have done. But there's one thing that I hear all the time on the road, and what I hear is, please tell your wife, thank you for sharing you with us. And so I'd like to say thank you to my wife, Steve Sanny, and I'd like you to stand so you can meet my wife if you haven't already. My daughter, Eva, go ahead, stand up, Eva, my 5-year-old. Annabeth Noels, turn around and say hi. And I'd like to also introduce my mother-in-law, Trova Melberg, pushing 95 years old. Stand up, Mom. She's going to run around the block a few times for you after this event, so I appreciate the sacrifice my family has had to endure to have me on the road and make it possible for me to serve you. Thank you so much. We're a work in process. All of us at Stand to Reason are a work in process. We have high ideals that we teach. When we get off the stage, we step down with you and seek by God's grace to live out those ideals to make a difference for the kingdom. We appreciate this so much. Thank you, Craig. Have a seat.
Well, the celebration isn't over. We have cake for everybody, and it's not just that little one. We have cake outside galore. Everybody gets cake. You can have the authors sign some books, or you can have them sign your cake, whatever you want. Get some books, get some cake, enjoy the evening out in the fresh air outside, and we will just keep the party going. Thank you so much for coming.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.